book lovers, it's Jenny at Julia Baby Jen, and this is my March wrap-up. Alright, so this is the third time I've tried this, and I'm now on my husband's phone trying to record this because I think my phone is seriously broke. There's something wrong with the software on my iPhone. I don't know what's going on, but it goes back and forth saying how much storage I have, and now it's saying I have 0 storage, which is ridiculous because I have tons of storage on there, and it won't let me install any updates. It won't let me do anything except text and call. I mean, the apps mostly work, but my camera isn't working worth shit, so I don't know what's going on. I will be visiting the iStore really soon, the Apple Store really soon, to fix my phone. But in the meantime, my husband, who spent all day trying to fix my phone, is letting me use his, so I can finish this wrap-up because, gosh darn it, I really wanted to get this done today. Anyway, let's get moving. I read 18 books in March, and seriously, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be speeding through these because I have done this over and over and over all day, and I'm tired of it. So yeah, this will be pretty quick. Alright, first I have Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed this read. This is a new series in the Shadowhunter world. All of you probably by now know about Shadowhunters and Cassandra Clare, and if you don't, this isn't the book to start with. You really want to read everything else first because this is a kind of a continuation even though it's new characters. But I really love this. I love the characters. I loved the new dilemmas and the murder mystery and the action and everything else that we get in the Shadowhunter book that's so awesome. Sorry for that noise. That's my cat being a goofball. But yeah, this is really wonderful. This takes place in our current world in LA. So this is at the LA Institute. So yeah, I really love this. I loved Emma and Julian. The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. This is the second book in the Remnant Chronicles, and I love this series so far. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Really awesome fantasy. This is kind of a romantic fantasy with a lot of political intrigue. There's action, but it's a little bit slower moving than some other fantasies that I've read, but I still really got into it. And I loved this one where she's in a totally different country. It's actually her enemy's country. And it's really dark and gripping. And we learn so much more about the world and about her and about all the political stuff. And this has really gotten to be a great series. And I cannot wait to finish this. I reread Conspiracy of Alchemists by Liesl Schwartz. This was in my book jar challenge, and I want to finish this trilogy this year, and so I reread the first one because it's been so long since I read it. This is a historical fiction, steampunk, action-adventure story with a little bit of magic thrown in, and I really love this story. Basically, there's this evil group of people who are trying to resurrect this dimension to gain more power, and it's stupid, but they kidnap Ellie, the main character's father, because he's a scientist and they think that he can help them. So she's on a mission to rescue her father with this alchemist named Marsh, who's part of the alchemists, who she doesn't trust all that much, but they're enemies to this other group, and it's her only chance of really saving her father. So it starts out in Paris and goes to London, and then it goes to all across Europe, and then they end up in Turkey. So it just goes everywhere, and it's great steampunk, great adventure, great steampunk inventions, great historical fiction, and I really love this series. This is a 5-star read for me. I read Runaways by Brian Vaughan. This is the first in a graphic novel series, and I really like this book. It was really fun. This one's called Pride and Joy, and this one I gave 4 stars. This follows these 6 kids who live in LA, and their parents are super rich and powerful, and once a year they have this meeting that they all get together and they discuss charitable works, projects they work on. And the 6 kids have to entertain themselves while their parents are doing this. And so this year the kids decide to spy on their parents, and they find out they're actually super villains. And the story goes from there, and it's so much fun, and I really enjoyed this book. The Edge of Everything by Jeff Giles. I adored this. I gave this 4.5 stars, and I did do a full, very long review on this book, and I'll leave the link down below. The first half of it is spoiler-free. Basically, this is a mashup of a fantasy, paranormal, with a contemporary and a mystery. It's mostly following this family who's grieving the death of the father and husband who died in a caving accident. but while that's going on in the background, it becomes a big central part of the story. I feel like really big. There's a paranormal activity going on around them, and it deals with the hell dimension and grim reapers and lost souls and evil souls and that kind of thing. And there is a romance in this, and I just love this. This was real. I'm not describing it. I can't describe how great this book is. The writing is fantastic in this. It felt so fresh and original. I really loved this book quite a bit. So yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars. Great read. Frog Kisser by Garth Nix. This is a fairy tale retelling of The Princess and the Frog, a very loose retelling. And we are following Princess Anya on her quest. She starts off having to turn this one frog back into a prince. It's her older sister's suitor, and the quest kind of gets bigger and bigger as she goes along, and there's just a lot more to the world, and it becomes very awesome, like the adventure, and it's great. There's lots of magic, and it's just a really fun really fun adventure, and I really liked it. I gave this 4 stars. I did do a review on it, a spoiler-free review, and I will leave a link below so you can check that out if you want to. But yeah, this is a good read. Chasing the Rose by Andrea de Robelant. I don't know if I said that right. This is an adventure in the Venetian countryside. This takes place in Italy. This is a nonfiction book. This author is tracing the history of a unique rose that he finds in his ancestors' gardens. It's a Chinese rose, and it's become a wild rose, and it's reproducing, and so he basically goes on this discovery to find out more about this rose, and in the process learns more about his family's history. And it's actually a really great story. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot about roses in it. I picked it up from the Dollar Tree, and I picked it up because it was such a cute little book, and I loved the illustrations in it. It's so adorable. There's another one. The illustrator is Nina Fuga, and she's a London-based illustrator who was raised in Venice. So yeah, this was a really fun book. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I gave it 4 stars. A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This is a retelling basically of a Sherlock Holmes story. It's modern day. And this world, we presume that Watson and Holmes actually did exist, and they did solve these crimes. Watson wrote the books, but then they were published under their agent's name, Arthur Conan Doyle, and so these are the descendants of Watson and Holmes. We've got Charlotte Holmes and Jamie Watson, and they meet up at boarding school in Connecticut, and then murders happen, and they're being framed from them, so it's a mystery trying to solve the crimes. So it's very Sherlock Holmes-ish, especially the characters. They're a lot like their counterparts, and it's a really fun read. I gave this 4 stars. I did do a full spoiler-free review on this, and I will leave the link below for that if you'd like to check that out. The Truth About Forever by Sarah Dessen. This I gave 4 stars. I really do like Sarah Dessen when I get in a certain mood. I've had this book forever. This is for my book jar challenge. This one follows Macy, who is basically going through some self-discovery issues. Her boyfriend Wes, who is valedictorian Mr. Perfect, has gone off for the summer, and she's trying to figure out where that leaves her because she really has no friends other than him. And in the process, she meets this group of ragtag people who have a catering business, and she joins their group for the summer and does these caterings. And yeah, the story just kind of goes from there. Of course, there's romance and lots of fun. So this is one of my favorite ones by her. I really did like this. So yeah, definitely worth a read, especially if you want to go to beach read this summer. I would definitely recommend this one. To Capture What We Cannot Keep by Beatrice Collin. This is a historical fiction romance that centers around the building of the Eiffel Tower. I read this for my Around the World challenge and my 4 Seasons challenge. I needed a winter book set in Paris, so this one was it. We're following Emile, who's one of the architects of the Eiffel Tower, and this woman named Katrina, who is there as kind of a nanny for 2 kids that are like in their early 20s and are on this trip across Europe. And they meet by chance, and it's kind of their story from there, and I did really enjoy this. So yeah, 4 stars, pretty good historical fiction romance. I liked it. Glitter by April Lynn Pike. This one was really interesting. I gave this 4 stars. It takes place in the future, and basically in the futuristic world, famine has happened and there's no food. This one company develops this product to create synthetic food and of course becomes rich and powerful. They convince the French government to sell them the Palace of Versailles, but the loophole is they have to keep it historically accurate. So the people who live there live like they would in the Baroque area, except with lots of technology. And the people who live there are people who are important in the company, shareholders, presidents, people who work there who are very important, and their families. And they basically live in this society of the Baroque era with technology. Our main character, Danica, has a ruthless mother who has convinced the current king of the Palace of Versailles, so the king of the company, who's actually the president of the company, to marry her. So they're engaged, but she wants nothing to do with his evil tyrant. But she's kind of stuck under her mother's thumb, and she and her mother witnessed something, so they're basically blackmailing the king. And she's trying to get out. So to do so, she needs this face reconstructive surgery because she's all over the world press-wise, so she doesn't want anybody to recognize her. That's going to cost her 5 million euros to do it. So she decides to start secretly selling the members of royalty in the palace this drug called glitter, and she does it by putting it in their makeup. And it's a really awesome story, lots of twists, and the ending was, oh my crap, holy crap, was it a cliffhanger ending? And there will be a sequel that'll come out, I think, this year. Courage to Soar by Simone Biles. This is her story about how her childhood and how she became an Olympic champion at Rio, and this was really cute. I gave this 4 stars. I loved learning more about Simone. She's such a fun, bubbly personality. I came across in the writing, and yeah, I recommend this for anybody who's a fan of her and likes gymnastics in general. It was really fun. I really did enjoy this. The Bone Readers by Jacob Ross. I read this for my Around the World Challenge. This is a adult crime mystery that takes place in Grenada in the Caribbean. Actually, it's a fake island, but it's modeled after Grenada, so I count that as Grenada. This was really good. It took a little bit to get going, but once it did, it was a really good mystery, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Nil by Lynn Matson. This was actually my least favorite read of the month. I gave this 3 stars. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was just an okay read for me. It never really hooked me. But this basically is an island, the island of Nil, and it's like in another dimension or something. It doesn't really exist, but it sucks teenagers from our current world to it, and once you're there, you have 365 days to live there, and you either need to escape by then or you die. And you escape by finding these like air tunnel things that suck you back to Earth. But they're really hard to find, and it's hard to live there, and it sucks other things like animals and killer stuff all the time. So it's really kind of an interesting dynamic. So there's all these teenagers living on here. It's kind of like Survivor in that way. You know, there's some that are not so nice people and all that. So there's a lot of danger and all that, but I just didn't feel like, it felt like it was plodding along, like this day we did this day we did this, kind of a feel to it. It just didn't really ever captivate me. I did like the main characters, Thad and Charlie, who's a girl, and their romance, and I did love the ending. I thought the ending was the best part of it, but yeah, it just never really hooked me. It was an okay read. Avalon by Mindy Arnett. This is a space sci-fi story adventure. Our main character, Zeth, his parents were tried for treason against the ITA in this world, which is basically like the government that owns space travel, so to speak. And so they're dead, and he's with his uncle who bartered the ship Avalon, which is what they live on, to this mob boss guy named Hammer. So Zeth basically is owned by Hammer, and he has a group of comrades who like do thievery type jobs for Hammer to earn money, and he's trying to get enough money to buy back the ship Avalon. His little sister Leslie is also with him. I think she's 13. She's like a computer genius. So basically what happens is they're sent on this job to the Belgrave district, which is like kind of like the Bermuda Triangle would be here, where all kinds of weird things happens to ships there. People disappear. It's weird. So they don't want to go, but they're supposed to recover this ship. And when they get there, all hell breaks loose, and the story goes from there. So it's a really interesting story. Lots of twists, turns, adventures. It moves quickly. The characters stand out. I really love this. I gave this 4 stars, and I'm going to read the sequel, Polaris, hopefully soon. So yeah, this is a good one. 80 Days by Matthew Goodman. This is a nonfiction account of the history-making race between Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland. This takes place in late 1800s. They're both women journalists, and this is shortly after Jules Verne's book Around the World in 80 Days has come out. So they're basically trying to prove that they can get around the world in less than 80 days. And back then it was a lot harder to travel. It was by steamship and all that. So this is their history account of that race. What I also loved about this was that it was a lot of information on women's journalism at the time, and a lot about these 2 particular journalists, and I learned a lot. It's a great feminist book. I really recommend it if you're interested in any of that, not just the race, but that aspect, because that part of it was my favorite part of the entire book. So yeah, I really did enjoy this, and I gave it 4 stars. The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson, 5 stars. Loved this fantasy. This is an adult fantasy world, the land of the Tearling, who is being oppressed by their neighbors, the Mortmies, by this evil, evil queen. And this queen, the Queen of the Tearling, we're following Kelsey, who's just turned 19 and ascended to the throne. She's been raised in isolation and undercover, so she couldn't be assassinated. And she has to earn her people's trust to try to make change and help her people along. So this is kind of her story, the start of her story doing that. And I really loved this fantasy. This is a very dark fantasy, very gripping, lots of stuff going on. And I really did love this. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the trilogy. Wonderful, wonderful fantasy. And finally, we're down to the last 2 books I read for the month. The Girl at Midnight and The Shadow Hour by Melissa Gray. The Girl at Midnight was a reread for me. I gave both of these books 4.5 stars. This is a fantasy that's compared a lot to Laini Taylor's Daughter of Smoke and Bone. It's very similar, and the writing is also very similar. It's not quite as good, obviously. I don't think anything can be as good as Laini Taylor's fantasy, but this one is still really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So basically the premise of this is a world hidden within our own. We have 2 races of creatures, the Drakians and the Avacins. The Avacins are part people, part bird, and the Drakians are part dragon and part bird. So the Avacins have feathers and the Drakians have dragon scales. And they've been at war with each other for centuries. And in the middle of this mix comes Echo, a human girl. She's been adopted by the Avacin when she was little because she came from an abusive family. She was adopted by the Alla, who is the wisest Avacin there is and kind of is in charge of a lot of different things. And so she adopts Echo, and basically both sides have been looking for something called the Firebird. There's a prophecy that whoever gets this Firebird will create peace between these people, and Echo kind of gets stuck in the middle of this whole thing. So that's kind of the premise of the first book. It goes further for that. Obviously in The Shadow Hour I can't tell you a lot without giving away the ending to this. But I love this fantasy. The world building is so well done in this. It's written very poetically, a lot like Laini Taylor, and the characters are quirky and interesting and unique, and I really love the characters to this. And there's also a lot of emphasis on that there's no such thing as good or evil people. We start out the book kind of thinking the Avacin are the good people because that's where Echo lives and that's who she's with, and the Drakians are the bad guys, but we get perspectives from both sides, so it becomes pretty clear there's no such thing as a bad people or good people. It's your decisions, and even within the ranks there's people who don't go with authority so much. So people are really kind of doing their own thing in this. So I really love that theme. I thought that was really well done in this, and it continues on really well with The Shadow Hour. This really amps the stakes. There's a lot of action and a lot of world travel all over the world between dimensions and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a really fun series. I really recommend this. The last book, The Savage Dawn, will be coming out in July, and I cannot wait for that. And that is my March wrap-up. And I'm sorry if I kind of sped through that really quickly. But again, I've been doing this all day. And that did kind of help me because I was able to get through each book quicker because I talked about it so much. I kind of knew what I wanted to say quickly. But so yeah, that's the books I read in March. I did really, really well. I'm very happy with how it came out. The only book I didn't finish that I really wanted to was Turn Right at Machu Picchu, which I have started but not finished yet. So I will work on reading this in April. And there's a few ebooks I wanted to read, but that's not such a big deal. So for the most part, I got through most of the TBR. So I was really happy with that. I did a really good job. Yay me! And I'm excited for April. Leave me comments below on what you read in March, or if you'd like to talk about any of these books. And I hope everyone has a good day. I will talk to you later.